Never heard them laugh like that?
We gotta get out of I don't think it's gotta get out of but, you know, yeah, you got Los Angeles, San Francisco.
White trash, trailer trash.
No, it's the truth. It's the truth. And I'm talking to the woman. And what's well, what it is she has to make that decision. And I just hope she doesn't. I told her I can predict what's going to happen.
Quiet, please. Calling the jury.
Dale, I'm really sorry. But I'm moving now. Because we went first.
Come to order, Department 106 is again in session.
All right, back on the record. All parties, jurors, and alternates are present. You may resume.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you for your patience. I don't have too much more to go here. I wanted to talk about the concept of goal-directed behavior. It's very important. It's a concept that I think will help you answer questions about mental health and whether Mr. Gargiulo can form the appropriate state of mind to kill, etc. The idea of goal-directed behavior helps us answer those questions, and we have to look at the evidence when we're talking about goal-directed behavior. You know, the defense is being presented here as Mr. Gargiulo has dissociative identity disorder, and you'll see an unconsciousness instruction in there, and we know that that's not supported by the evidence because of this. And this is what Dr. Shug said to sort of put a fine point on this. And the idea is when we're trying to figure out what's going on in somebody's mind, we look at their conduct. We look at what they do. We look at their behaviors. And I think I tried to make the example with Dr. Castellano is when we're talking about goal-directed behavior and trying to figure out what's going on in somebody's mind, if I want to harm somebody by stabbing them, I wouldn't do it with a wet noodle, for example. You're picking the appropriate weapon to harm somebody. That's goal-directed behavior. I want to harm you. I'm picking the right weapon. Maybe I want to try to walk out of this courtroom. So I'm putting my feet in front of each other, I'm making my way for the door, and I walk out. That's goal-directed behavior. If I'm trying to leave the room and I end up walking in circles or something, that's not goal-directed behavior. So the idea, the concept of goal-directed behavior tells us what's going on in somebody's mind. And we'll look at the evidence and see what was going on in Mr. Gargiulo's mind, and you'll conclude he's absolutely, totally aware of what he's doing because of his behaviors at the crime scene. And what crime scenes, and what Dr. Shug said about this is highlighted here. Dr. Shug, hypothetically, a person's actions is a person's actions before, during, and immediately after a crime. Would that not demonstrate the mental state of that person? I would take hypothetically off and say, yes, that's absolutely true. And then here's the upshot. So in your opinion, the best way to measure the mental state of a person is to look at their behavior before, during, and after the commission of a crime. And he says, I think that's critical. So that's what we're going to focus on here is behaviors, and you'll conclude that Mr. Gargiulo is absolutely, positively aware of what he's doing. And we'll run through some factors here. You've seen these factors before. Mr. Dameron gave you the factors that show all the similarities in this case, which is our web of circumstantial evidence that points at Mr. Gargiulo as the perpetrator in this case. That also has a second purpose of showing what's going on in his mind, that he has goal-directed behavior, what he's doing in terms of selecting victims and those different factors. So I'm going to go through the 20 factors that Mr. Dameron already went through. I'll go through them quickly so we don't have to repeat all the language. But this is critical to your analysis. What is going on here in Mr. Gargiulo's mind? And this answers your question. Let's go through it now. First of all, victim selection. That's a conscious choice that Mr. Gargiulo is making by selecting all victims, young, attractive, and outgoing women. That is no coincidence. If he was sleepwalking or doing something else, there would be victims of all walks of life. He's not. He's selecting a certain type of victim, goal-directed behavior. All the victims are murdered in their homes, not out on a busy boulevard, not in the desert, not in a restaurant, all in their homes. No coincidence, goal-directed behavior. All the victims are murdered near Mr. Gargiulo, all in his proximity. That's goal-directed behavior. He's targeting people that are in his proximity, goal-directed behavior. The victims are targeted. He has knowledge of the victims. He's watching and pre-selecting these targets. These are not random people that he's attacking. He's targeting these women for a specific reason. They're near him. He can watch them. He can gather real-time intelligence on them and then attack them. That's not random. That's not the function of somebody who's unconscious. That's not a function of somebody who can't plan. That's a function of somebody who's absolutely calculating what they're doing. It's no coincidence. So targeted victims is goal-directed behavior. These are bold and high-risk crimes. These are all occurring. These are subtleties in the evidence that we have to look at here. These are not crimes that are being committed in remote areas somewhere necessarily. They're in high-risk, bold situations where there's a high risk of being caught. People, neighbors, people watching densely. There's something to that, right? The reasonable inference to be drawn from that is that these crimes are occurring in a certain place because of a certain reason. And that's Mr. Gargiulo making decisions about how he's going to attack and why he's going to attack and where he's going to attack. They're very, very bold crimes. These aren't happening in dark alleys somewhere. They're happening in people's homes or in front of their homes. High level of risk of being caught. That's a function of making a decision, which is goal-directed behavior. His strength and athleticism, being able to use his strength to his advantage to murder and kill and get in windows is a function of goal-directed behavior. Being very evidence conscious, not leaving evidence, this is a big one, not leaving evidence behind, using booties, committing crimes when there's no witnesses around, committing crimes when there's no video cameras around. Very evidence conscious. That's a big, big concept when it comes to goal-directed behavior. Factor number 9. These are examples of the goal-directed behavior that Mr. Dameron went through, but I wanted to point these two out to you. I don't think Mr. Dameron went over these, but I wanted to point them out. I think they're very interesting pieces of evidence that will tell you a little bit about what's going on in Mr. Gargiulo's mind. In this particular photograph, which is the kitchen of Ms. Bruno's home, inside that red circle, that's actually a little bit off. There's a placard above there, and it's shown in the inset of the right. That's a blood drop. And the evidence is that's Maria's blood. That's a drop of Maria's blood. And it's right there at the window. And that's remarkably similar to what we see at Ms. Elleren's residence. So what we have is a very bloody crime scene, right? And you would expect a lot of blood. If you're bloody and you're going to climb out the window, you would expect to find a lot of blood on the window, outside the window, on the windowsill, just below the window. We don't have that. It's the absence of that massive amount of blood. It stops right there. It stops right there. There's a drop right there. Well, what does that tell you? The reasonable inference to be drawn from that is when Mr. Gargiulo gets to that window and he's got a bloody knife on him, and that's where the blood stops, what's he doing at that moment? What are we inferring from that moment? He's watching and waiting for a moment to escape. If he was unconscious and didn't know what he was doing, there'd be blood all the way out there and down the street and whatever. But it stops right there, and it tells you he's concealing the knife at that point. He's concealing his bloody clothing at that point, probably taking off the booties at that point. He's watching out that window to see if anybody's coming. He's standing right there. That's the last blood that you'll see inside this house. There's nothing outside the house. And that's very telling, isn't it? That's him consciously making a choice to make sure the coast is clear before he goes out that window. So take a look at that blood as evidence of him being evidence conscious and having goal-directed behavior. And there's another example of that. So you can see how this is relevant to goal-directed behavior, but it's also a relevant similarity when we're connecting all these cases together. Let's look at the Ashley Elleren scene. What you're seeing here, what you've seen before, is the blood trail that goes out the door. Where G here, that's a bloody shoe print. We've got the blood drops that are going to the left and then out the door. You have all this back in the jury room, but if you follow the blood trail, what we can infer from this, based on where the positioning of the blood is and where the positioning of the bloody shoe prints are, Mr. Gargiulo he's just murdered Ashley Elleren, and he's walking toward the door. He's walking down the hallway. Let's pretend this is the hallway. And he's trying to get out to that jury box right there. That's the exit. And what the blood trail basically shows is that there's blood drops to the left. And then if you watch the blood trail, it sort of starts hooking out wide like this. Because he's got to see out the door. He's got to make sure the coast is clear. He's thinking about what's going on, right? Is the coast clear? There's somebody in the park with a dog. I got to get out of here. So he's watching, and you can watch the blood trail, and it tells a story. Blood at this crime scene very much tells a story. So he's out here, and you can see he swings wide a little bit. You can see he's angled where now he can see out the door. You've been there. You've seen the landing and how you can see out. And then the last blood that you see. So he's taken the knife with him to the door. And going back to Bruno, taking the knife with him to the door. Why do you take the knife with you to the door? You're thinking, you're probably going to use it offensively if somebody catches you in the act. But he's taken the knife. It's a similarity. It's a commonality. It's evidence of goal-directed behavior. I want to get out of here. I want to get away. I want to make sure the coast is clear. He's taken the knife to the window with him at the Bruno crime scene, and he does it again right here. Remarkable similarity. You will not see blood after about this area here, right on the door, right on the door frame. That's the last place. Wouldn't you expect, with all that blood, if somebody wasn't thinking and was running away and unconscious or whatever, there'd be more blood outside on that landing or down the stairs or something? No evidence of that. The blood trail stops there. And where that blood trail stops, here and back at Elleren, tells you a story, doesn't it? That tells you that Gargiulo is thinking, making sure the coast is clear, taking the knife with him, goal-directed behavior. And it's a similarity between the two crime scenes as well. The attacks are all very stealthy in nature. That's goal-directed behavior. Again, these attacks are not happening in the middle of a courtroom or with a lot of witnesses or in the middle of a very crowded area. They're very stealthy in nature, goal-directed behavior. Cold-blooded murders, the attacks are all, they're all overkill. They're all overkill. This is a function of somebody who's on purpose trying to overkill for whatever sadistic purpose there is there. These are all overkill, goal-directed behavior. With Ashley Ellerin, there's a piece of evidence here that I wanted to point out to you. I know these are very difficult to look at. This is Ashley's body. If you notice inside the red circle on the back of her wrist is a geometric sort of blood print. So looking at that and then looking at the blood pool that's next to her and seeing she's got this massive injury to her neck, what you can infer, your common sense from that, is that Ashley was on her belly at some point, bleeding probably out of her neck and leaving this blood pool, and probably on top of her left hand. You see that geometric impression there? She's laying on her left hand and the blood's being transferred off the carpet onto her left hand. Yet she's in this position here. And there's no evidence that she was rolled by Jennifer DeSisto or anything like that. This is how she was found. So
He's drawing inferences from the evidence, and that's all he's doing. The objection's overruled.
So what you can reasonably infer here is that Ms. Ellerin was on her stomach. And we know she's got wounds on her back. She's stabbed on the front and her back. And Mr. Gargiulo rolled her over for whatever purpose. And her finger is pointed to her groin area, and which you can infer that possibly she's being posed that way, so that she's discovered that way. But the point is, this took time. This took time to do this, and this blood here tells a story that Ms. Ellerin was on her belly and then was rolled over. And she was on her belly long enough to bleed out like that, and then thank you. And this took some time to do this. It's a function of time. It's a function of thinking. It's a function of goal-directed behavior. It's not the function of somebody who's unconscious or not thinking things through. This is what Mr. Gargiulo wanted to do. And it took some time to do it. Goal-directed behavior. The victims were ambushed with blitz-style attack, very similar attacks. That's goal-directed behavior. The choice of the weapon, not guns, not ligatures, not a lamp or a blunt object. It's all the choice of a weapon. Making the choice, choosing to use a knife in this, that's a goal-directed behavior. It's not a random thing that happens. I freak out, I'm unconscious, I'm sleepwalking, let me grab the nearest thing and start attacking. It's always a knife. It's always a knife. That's goal-directed behavior. Absence of ligatures, goal-directed behavior. There's no these victims are not controlled by tying them up or anything like that. They're controlled by by immediate, massive, frenzied force. All goal-directed behavior. No evidence of escalation of violence, meaning there's no, they're not being attacked with additional, punched out or anything like that. They're attacked in the same way. The time of the attacks is critical. I wanted to focus on that. And I'm going to come back to it. The time of the attacks here is critical. The real-time intelligence that Mr. Gargiulo is gathering to attack these women, he's picking, and you're going to hear this over and over and over because it is so important. If somebody is sleepwalking or somebody is unconscious or has dissociative identity disorder, has whatever their disorder is, and they don't have control or agency or have control over their functions and things like that, well, they're going to attack randomly. And they're probably going to be caught because they don't have control. Each and every time here, we have uncanny timing. Very, very, very narrow windows of opportunity to attack. Very narrow windows. That's a function of watching and waiting and planning and picking the perfect opportunity to attack. Tricia Piccaccio, there was one time to catch up with Tricia, it was when she was on her doorstep before she got in the house. That's planning, goal-directed behavior. There was only one opportunity to get to Ashley Ellerin. It's a busy household. It's very secure. She has friends there all the time. People coming and going. When are you going to get Ashley Ellerin alone? Very narrow window of opportunity. You have to be watching. The strong inference there, Mr. Gargiulo has to be watching all the time, gathering real-time information, and then finally when it's, wow, roommate's gone? Roommate's gone? Boyfriend just left? Nobody's around? I can see into the house? Appears to be getting out of the shower. I'm in. Like that. Opportunity. And I want to hit on that word. Opportunity. One concept that links these four attacks, one of the many, many circumstantial evidence concepts that links these four attacks, opportunity, opportunity, opportunity. There was a narrow opportunity to get to Tricia Piccaccio. That's a function of watching and waiting and planning. There was a very narrow window of opportunity to get into Michelle Murphy's apartment. Roommate's gone, windows open, boyfriend's not there, she's home alone. Very narrow window of opportunity. Same thing with Maria Bruno. Very, very narrow window of opportunity. Husband just left, she's home alone, I know she's home alone, I'm in. Very common feature between all four attacks. Opportunity, opportunity, opportunity. If you give Mr. Gargiulo an opportunity, he's in. When he's targeted you for murder and you give him an opportunity, he's in. That's how sophisticated he is. All the victims attacked at night, that's no coincidence. That's a function of somebody who's planning and watching and picking the best opportunity to commit the crime and get away. Not in the morning. It's not a busy lunch hour out on Temple. The perfect opportunity at night. The gears are turning. That's what that evidence means. Impeccable timing, we talked about that. Uncanny, scary, impeccable timing. The window of opportunity, we just talked about that. Uncanny. The opportunity attack here, the window of opportunity, very, very narrow. And he hit it because he's the boy next door killer, and he's watching, and he's waiting, and that's what he's doing. He's waiting for an opportunity to kill. Goal-directed behavior. Absence of sexual assault shows he's not trying to sexually assault. He's doing it for some other reason, some sadistic reason, or something to do with antisocial personality disorder. No evidence of crime scene cleanup. It's significant that we're not cleaning up after the crime. We're not covering up the body. We're not moving the body, really. We're not moving it to conceal the body or something like that, or moving the body into the bushes. All the victims are left where they are. That's done on purpose. They're not moved, dumped, or hidden. That's a commonality here, and it shows that this is goal-directed behavior. The injury patterns are all the same, or very, very similar, vital parts of the body, etc., and multiple times. Frenzied knife attacks. Throat attacks, we talked about that, goal-directed behavior. Collar wounds, goal-directed behavior. We're going for a vital part of the body on purpose. These aren't random attacks on random parts of the body. They're going right for the throat. Gargiulo's going right for the throat, or the collar, or fatal wounds. Goal-directed behavior. No theft or robbery. The motive here is to go after killing these women and nothing else. That's it. Wanted to run through a laundry list very quickly on goal-directed behavior on Ms. Piccaccio. Mr. Gargiulo had knowledge of the habits of the Piccaccios. He was able to assess the surroundings of the Piccaccio residence, real-time intelligence. Knew to attack Tricia at the doorstep instead of at her car, less likely to be seen. Knew when Tricia would be home. Knew where she would enter the house. Hid behind the bushes, waited to attack. Ambushed Tricia at the perfect time. Her family was sleeping. Her back was turned. Quickly controlled Tricia physically. Broke her arm to prevent her from entering the house. He knew if she entered the house before or during the attack, he would be caught. Left the scene without leaving a trail of blood drops. Left no fingerprints or murder weapon. Concealing evidence. Consciousness of guilt. Gears are always turning. Planning. Premeditating. Thinking. Goal-directed behavior. Ashley Ellerin. He targeted Ashley, watched her home for months, and on the day of the attack, knew the whereabouts of Ashley's roommate and friends, had a successful method of entering the house undetected, brought the murder weapon with him to the home. No knife was missing from the house. Ambushed Ashley at the perfect time while she was alone, stabbed her 47 times, controlled Ashley physically as she tried to defend herself, posed Ashley's body post-mortem, rolled her over, took the time to do it, and did not flee right away, which means the gears are turning. He's thinking about what he's doing. Ms. Ellerin, again, slowly crept around the window looking to see if someone was coming before exiting the house. That's what I was talking about with the blood trail. Ensuring he was not caught at the crime scene equals guilt and awareness he committed the crime. Held the knife or the murder weapon in his hand in order to be ready to silence any potential witnesses. He's going to that front door with a knife in his hand. Why? Ready to use it. And he stashes it before he gets outside and he can be seen with it, because there's no blood outside the house. Had a plan in place to not leave blood drops outside the house. Had a plan in place to not be seen with bloody clothes or the murder weapon. Successfully carried out these plans and avoided leaving blood drops past the front door and escaped unseen, as we discussed. Ms. Bruno, more evidence of goal-directed behavior. Waited for Maria's. This is all a function of circumstantial evidence and the reasonable interpretations of the circumstantial evidence and looking at the totality of the evidence in this case. Waited for Maria's husband to leave and for the perfect opportunity to attack. Remove the screen. Place the window screen in the dirt below a different window, trying to conceal evidence. Consciousness of guilt. Trying to buy himself time. Got to put the screen over there so it's not laying in front of the house, which would alert people that there's a problem in the house. Force the window open. Climb through the window. Put on surgical booties over his shoes, trying to conceal evidence. Consciousness of guilt. He did all of this quietly so as not to wake Maria up. Attacked Maria while she was sleeping alone and naked in her own bed. Controlled and stabbed Maria. Mutilated Maria's body by removing her breast implants and nipples. Careful and time-consuming. Knows what he is doing. Not an easy or frenzied task. Posed Maria's body and placed the nipple over her mouth. Wanted to show his work. Removed the surgical booties. Attempted to take them with him. Concealing evidence equals consciousness of guilt. Goal-directed behavior. Goal-directed behavior. Goal-directed behavior. Put the knives on the floor in order to throw out the cops, possibly. Held the knife in his hand while going toward the window, ready to attack any potential witnesses or threats. Just like at Ashley Ellerin's, he is learning and using what worked for him previously. He's improving. And then he closed the window behind him. The gears are turning. Closed the window, did not leave the murder weapon, his bloody clothes, or any fingerprints at the crime scene. He fled. And then Ms. Murphy. Laundry list with Ms. Murphy on goal-directed behavior with Ms. Murphy. Perfect opportunity to attack. She was alone. The lights were off. The roommate was gone. The boyfriend was gone. Window was open. Opportunity. Perfect opportunity to attack. That means he's watching, he's waiting, he's planning, he's premeditating. Dressed in all black and a baseball cap. The inference there is he's doing that to avoid being caught. Approached Michelle's apartment once the lights were turned off. Climbed onto the railing outside of Michelle's apartment. Climbed onto the ledge with the knife in his hand or in a bag or something similar, probably concealed. Cut the screen in a clean L shape while balancing on the ledge. That takes concentration, that takes premeditation, that takes thinking, that takes consciousness. Climbed from the ledge onto the narrow, through a ledge into the narrow slit in the window screen and into the apartment. unlock the deadbolt and chain of her front door. It appears like he may have staged that door to escape. He ran right out the door without stopping, so he left the door open or unchained so he could get out quickly. Got on top of Michelle, prepared to subdue her, attacked Michelle while she was sleeping alone and naked in her own bed. Not when the boyfriend was home, not when there's somebody in the house who could see him, not when there's witnesses in the alley. Perfect opportunity to attack. He's home alone. No one can see him do this. That's how he works. It's a function of consciousness of guilt. It's a function of goal-directed behavior and planning and premeditation. Stabbed Michelle repeatedly. When Michelle managed to push Gargiulo off, he said, "I'm sorry," which means he knew what he did, consciousness of guilt. Escaped to the unlocked front door, took the knife with him, stopped his wound from dripping blood and leaving a trail, concealing evidence. You were out there, you saw the blood trail, or you saw where it ended, and you had the diagram where it ended. The blood trail ends almost right adjacent to his apartment. How did he stop bleeding? He must have stopped himself from bleeding. So that's a conscious act that he did to stop himself from bleeding. Again, the roommate wasn't home, perfect opportunity to attack. Those are all factors of consciousness of guilt. When you look at the evidence, there's no question that Mr. Gargiulo is totally conscious and aware and planning what he's doing. There's overwhelming evidence of that. And I'll wrap up. Tricia Boccaccio, Ashley Ellerin, and Maria Bruno, through the evidence in this case, are testifying from the grave and telling you that defendant Gargiulo murdered them. Please listen to them and the evidence. Tricia fought for her life, and by doing so was able to get a very high quantity of defendant Gargiulo's DNA on her fingernails. That is Tricia telling you who killed her. Even in her dying throes, even after almost 26 years, Tricia will not be silenced. She is pleading with you through DNA evidence to believe that defendant Gargiulo murdered her. Please listen to her and listen to the evidence. Ashley Ellerin also fought for her life as she gave her blood at the end of defendant Gargiulo's knife to leave a very telling and compelling blood trail through the house that her killer is the left-handed Michael Gargiulo. Listen to Ashley and listen to her plea for justice. Maria Bruno never had a chance to fight for her life because defendant Gargiulo, in another cowardly attack, mutilated her while she was sleeping. But it was Maria who gave her DNA that linked her to the blue surgical booty dropped outside her apartment that also had Mr. Gargiulo's DNA on it. A link so strong that Gargiulo lamented to undercover detectives, "How am I going to explain that booty to the jury, to you?" Listen to Maria Bruno's plea for justice and tell defendant Gargiulo that it is his own DNA that he cannot manipulate. And you, the jury, will not be fooled. Defendant Gargiulo is a serial killer and predator and everyone's worst nightmare. His hobby is to target women, to wait and watch and to pounce when the perfect opportunity to kill arises. And the way Gargiulo sees himself, he is a semi-professional killer who is above the law and brags about being able to get away with murder. But not this time. Gargiulo failed in his mission to kill Michelle Murphy because she is tougher than Gargiulo fought off his cowardly attack, kicked the crap out of him, and caused him to cut himself and leave a damning trail of blood from her bedroom to his apartment. In the end, Michelle Murphy did not allow Gargiulo to overpower her, and she did not allow Gargiulo to take control over her. Michelle Murphy triumphed over evil that night, and she told Gargiulo, no, not this time. Now it's your turn to tell Mr. Gargiulo no. Tell him no for Tricia Piccaccio. Tell him no for Ashley Ellerin. Tell him no for Maria Bruno. Tell defendant Gargiulo he is finally going to be held responsible for the death and destruction that he caused for over 15 years. And he is guilty of the first-degree murder of Ashley Ellerin, the first-degree murder of Maria Bruno, and the willful, deliberate, and premeditated attempted murder of Michelle Murphy. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Counsel, could I see you at the bench for a moment, please?